welcome to Coffee with IOM. Today we are in Belgrade, Serbia, and we're pleased to be joined by Professor Aleksandra Krstić, Professor of Journalism and Vice Dean for Research and International Cooperation at the Faculty of Political Science, University of Belgrade. Professor Krstić is a long-standing partner of IOM and a dear friend, and we have cooperated a lot in the past throughout the Global Migration Media Academy and projects such as Working Together through the Nation Fashion, and so on. Today we'll explore the narratives around migration, how migration is portrayed in the media, and how responsible storytelling matters. Professor Krstić, for the ones who might not know you, especially in the region, could you please give us an intro and present yourself to the audience?
Hi, Francois. It's great to see you again, and very warm welcome to Belgrade, to you and your team. Yes, as you said, I teach journalism and media studies. I'm a full professor at the Faculty of Political Science, and we have already cooperated in so many different levels through so many different projects with partnering with IOM and the office also in Belgrade and in Sarajevo. So it is very important for us to talk about migration and to actually include these topics into our regular curricula at the university and at the faculty, because it's very important for our students to know how migration works and what are the main narratives that are driven by the mainstream media. So that is basically one of my largest topics that I cover when I teach also television journalism, investigative journalism, and not only for the undergraduate studies, but also for postgraduate levels when we talk about beat reporting. So, for example, if somebody wants to get specialized in this kind of reporting, then we cover the topic of migration.
In this region especially, and I would say starting 2015, when we saw an influx of migrants passing through the region, but also in Europe, certain narratives about migration dominate the debate. Why do you think migration is bringing so much attention, and so much attention from the public, from the media? And we know that there is a certain narrative that's dominating this discourse. In your opinion, why does migration bring so much attention?
It's a very complicated question, and there is no one answer to this, but it's basically covered with all different sorts of reasons. So it's from one side you have a political agenda that is dictating a lot of mainstream narratives in the media around the region, especially in the Western Balkans, when we know that a lot of topics have been politicized in different kinds of way. And on the other side, you have to understand that the political and societal contexts of our countries are pretty much overwhelmed with those political agendas. And actually, for example, when we talk about migration, then we can talk about borders and not about people. We talk about threat, and we don't talk about opportunities. We talk about victimization and not about possibilities, and actually the integration of migrants and refugees in the country. So Serbia has a long history in refugee and in migration and everything else, but it simply is still the overcoming narrative of migration is very polarized. It means that migrants in Serbian media are represented basically through black and white lenses. So either they are a threat to the society, to health of people, to the security, and on the other side, represented as victims of not only war that they fled from, but as victims of smuggling, victims of different crimes in the country, and also their intergroup crimes that have once been represented here. So I've done a lot of expert analysis on the media coverage of migration in Serbia from 2015 until 2020-21, and in those 5 to 6 years we have seen a lot of a change in the narrative of migration. it was always dominantly negative. However, the frames in which the migrants were reported changed over time. So at first time they were represented as, for example, migrant victims of war, and there were some more negative coverage at the beginning of 2015 and 16. However, as the time passed, they were represented more like human stories examples, but still not positive, but pretty much negatively represented. And I would want to add a lot of tabloidization and sensational reporting on migrants boost those narratives which are actually very negative.
It's interesting that you spoke about research and how the reporting evolved over time from 2015, because I feel like this is a trend. Like, for instance, today we observe that actually the number of people crossing the borders in the Western Balkans in Serbia is quite low. It's going down every year, especially this year, while the number of regular migrants coming with work permits regularly to the countries to support labor shortages in the country is rising, and this is a reality. And somehow this negative narrative, although they are regular migrants, is still present in the sense that they are it's no longer a border issue, but it's also like people might steal my job, they're coming for economic opportunities, I do not have a job, but we bring migrants here. So, it's still coming, this negative narrative. Do you see yourself that still some media are talking and raising this issue of labor migration, that it is a reality? Because our feeling as IOM is that this is a reality. We see it in the number of work permits. For instance, I think last year it was 107,000 work permits in the region, which has more than doubled in the past 2 years. But this is not present in the media. So do you see this growing, this aspect growing of migration in the representation, in the public, in the media, or not at all? And still we focus on the border aspect, the security, the threat, etc.
Yes, it has also changed, because at the first time it was the border, the security issues, the overwhelming pictures and photographs of migrants in fences or the borders, in camps, always represented through some administrative numbers, like 1 million people from outside will come to take over our country, or 1 million refugees will come to, steal our jobs and, rape our women. This was the narrative from 2015 onwards. In the last couple of years, I have seen the decrease of such a narrative. This is not only about the labor migration more. We don't have that as, for example, some countries in the European Union have, like transferring or traveling or moving from one country to the other to search for jobs. We have here another migration problem, is that you have young people who are leaving the country for a better life in the EU because they are not satisfied with what's going on in Serbia. Or the other thing is that how the political elite and how the government is actually representing what they can get from somebody who is, for example, returning to country, or what they can do. So this is one of the main issues, is that, for example, I read and I wrote a lot about the opinion polls in the country when common people in Serbia a couple of years ago were asked, would you take a migrant from somewhere, fled from somewhere with a heavy personal story to your home and provide him security there and, give him a shelter, or her? Majority of people said no, because they have already had negative perceptions of migration in the country, and the media is to blame a lot for that. Not only the media, the mainstream media that boosted the narrative, but also, I would say, the political elite who did not manage to change that narrative in a more positive way. Because, of course, there were some events that occurred and that were really negative, like attack on young women in the center of Belgrade, and different things that, for example, pupils in Serbia experienced with people who came there, but they were basically always accepted like strangers, like aliens, like people who do not belong there. And it was completely different to what we have had during the conflicts in the Balkans, and the refugees coming from the countries from the region now to Serbia, where Serbia was represented as a host country who accepted people who actually left for war. So this was like a paradoxical kind of thing, and different studies that I have read explain this in a different, from sociological, psychological, or different perspectives. But you have, and as you already know, the Western Balkans route and the Serbia on the way from migration of coming to the borders, being on the path of transit for the people wanting to go to different European Union countries like Croatia on the left and Hungary on the north, is going to has actually gone through a very difficult times, a lot of different changes, and one of the main examples is that when the media reports, and especially highly viewed media like a TV station, which is highly watched, or heavily read newspaper, then they are going to set the narrative about the migration in the country.
It's interesting that you mentioned the research and the attitude of people, because actually IOM Serbia last year did a partnership with Ipsos and did a survey among people in Serbia. And of course, the dominant feeling is negative, xenophobic, discriminatory towards migrants. But what's interesting in the research, and now it's striking numbers, it's like 62 people of the population never gets informed about migration. 50 people is against migrants staying in the country, whilst 52 never had a single interaction with them. So, there is this gap. It's like people have a negative feeling while actually they don't hear about migration. They don't have interaction with migrants. How do you think we can bridge this gap?
There is no way. I mean, there are probably ways, but look, this is not specific only for Serbia or for our countries. You have to remember in 2016 there was Brexit, right, which caused a huge earthquake in the EU. So what happened actually? What was predominantly driving the Brexit and the people of Great Britain to vote no for the EU is their attitude towards migration. Mm-hmm. And when I read some academic articles about how the media reported on migration, it turned out that actually the parts of the UK who never had close relation to migrants voted no, because they were in a way influenced with what media reported on migration. So in the UK, you could have lived in one of those towns and never have had any contacts with migrants and still have negative opinion on them. So this is kind of the same thing in Europe, in other parts of Europe. In Serbia, I read that more negative attitudes are basically captured by people living on borders or close to those camps that were actually provided for migrants when they come. So southern part of Serbia or northern part with Hungary, with the border of Hungary.
But then I think it brings also the question of responsibility and ethical journalism. How can journalists report on this topic, on migration topic, on sensitive topics, without reinforcing stereotypes or reinforcing this narrative? Are there ways for journalists to, and that's what we discussed yesterday when we were welcome to your lecture and we talked to your students, the media tend to select the headline that will attract attention and not the positive stories. So in your opinion, is there a way to report ethically about migration?
Of course there is a way to report ethically, because we all have to, when you are a journalist, you have to respect the code of conduct, which is you have to respect all ethical and professional standards when you report on any topic, but especially when sensitive topics and sensitive issues like migration are in question, then you have to follow specific protocols and rules, and they are there. So every journalist in the country knows this code of conduct. It depends on where you work, what is the editorial attitude, what is the editorial policy of your media, and how are you going to approach to these topics. So we have seen a lot of violation of the law on public information, of the law on electronic media, of every media law in the country that is practically violated every day in so many different aspects on reporting different topics, not only migration. But migration is the one topic beside climate change or some environmental issues boosting fake news and disinformation. So we see a lot of disinformation and misinformation basically coming through this topic of migration. This fact can be supported and is supported by different analyses also in the EU, and in one of my analyses is that how can you actually know what is true or what is fake when you report on migration. And I remember I read a lot of tabloid newspapers for my analysis, and there were different headlines and different coverage on the actually front pages of those tabloids, saying this woman from, I don't know, Jordan, she fled, but she has she's infected with AIDS, and now she's going to infect all the people, all the men living in Serbia, etc. So boosting kind of a security and health emergencies, and attaching a panic to the story, and driving all sorts of negative things attached to what is supposed to be a human example story and to be reported in a completely different way. So there are a lot of journalists who are actually who are not sticking to the code of conduct, and migration is one of the main topic that is driving this kind of change. And it's very easy to do this only if you slip from, you know, what is supposed to be a professional journalist to what is a tabloid, unchecked, unverified, fake, or call it whatever. It's kind of a pseudo journalism. It's not the real journalism we are talking about. And what is important for my students of journalism, and thank you for being there yesterday and giving this lecture on migration beyond headlines, is that they know through their education of what is the proper reporting on this, and that you have to actually respect the people whom you are interviewing and who are you talking to, like proper persons, that they all carry a sort of history with them, and some kind of personal experience that is not only that can't be actually perceived as negative, but actually to be reported in a very truthful way.
Speaking of this human story and the human approach and seeing the human behind the headline, we talked about this yesterday as well. At IOM, we're trying to have initiatives to bring the human in the front, and we had several exhibitions, including the Wearing It Together, which you were a part of. So we are trying to portray the migrants and tell the full story, and to reach people that would not be reached usually with the topic of migration. What kind of stories do you think are missing for the general public to understand migration fully and the full story of migration, not only the black and white, not only the nationality of someone, why this person came or not, but the full story?
Yes, it's a very good question. It's basically, I think a lot of things are missing because on one side, take a look at I don't know, a great human story, a great personal story about somebody. Who is going from the audience to identify with that story? Because we have had so many stories already told which actually contributed to our distancing from the migrants as a group of population. So I think more stories on integration. I know there are, and through our campaign, Wearing It Together, I know from interviewing migrants from all over the world in Belgrade, that they have had already contributed to this country in different ways. They are working, or they have been, I don't know, employed, or they are going to school, they study, some of them are very prominent in, I don't know, public life or something like that. So it's not only the perception there is a common perception that they actually came out of a war or battles or conflicts and they fled. There are different kinds of migration. We don't talk about it. We have a lot of, I don't know, Chinese people who want to contribute to the country, living here in working for big companies. This is also kind of migration of who these people are, how they live. Or, I don't know, go to any restaurant in Belgrade. People from Philippines or from India are working in the kitchens. You would want to talk with these people, who they are. I have neighbors who have employed different women and men working in the restaurant, and they contribute. Those are great people. So I think that those kind of stories are missing because already people coming from different parts of the world have been integrated into the community in a different way. But you never see them on TV, you never see their stories. It is not only about having a campaign and having people going through your cameras or through your newspapers only for one point in time. You need to basically talk about them and do different kinds of stories and still have boosting the interest of your local audience to actually perceive those stories as something which can be interesting for them. And what struck me the most is when we did this campaign together a couple of years ago with the fashion show and No Nation Fashion, which was really great, is that I really had a chance to talk with the migrants with really, really heavy stories which made me cry. But still I had to stay detached from writing about them. And this is something a journalist have to know. So as much as the story is strong, you have to keep the professional way of reporting, and you have to present the story in a proper manner that is actually professional journalism. Here you have a kind of a narrative that is slipping from this professional way of telling the story and going into more sensational thing, because as I told you yesterday, all my students are in dilemma, like how to report, and they asked you how to balance this kind of emotional trauma when you are actually presented with a story like this, and how to stay detached at the same time. And this is kind of a very positive thing for me, because they are aware of the dilemma they have to carry once they have to report on an emotional story, and on the other way, how to stay a professional journalist.
That's very interesting. We're talking about human stories. I wanted to look at the topic also of visuals and photography, because we're talking about headlines, but what is the importance of photography and visual in reporting on migration and bringing the stories forward?
Yes, this is very important thing that, that we did a lot in our visual communication topic in our collaboration. And it was really great that a couple of years ago we could have hosted at the Faculty of Political Science IOM and experts and photographs from the region actually filming and shooting and photo shooting the migrants through their professional careers, which was very beneficial for our students and for us to hear how they capture a migrant, different stories of migrants in Europe. But I would say that photography and filming migration is even more important than writing about them, because the photograph is something we capture in the first couple of seconds when we look at the headline, when we look at the front page, or when we look at the first couple of seconds of a video on any social media or traditional media. I'm talking about the TV representation. So it's very important to respect all the ethical codes in there. But what my analysis on visual representation of migrants in Serbia and on the Western Balkans route showed is that actually there is a paradox in representing migrants and refugees in a very positive way in photographs, showing them as completely normal people walking on the street, being very calm, very peaceful, etc. And on the other side, putting a terrible, terrible headline over that picture and saying, 3 million refugees and migrants will take over our country, will steal from our churches, houses, will actually, attack our cities, etc. So you have this kind of a paradoxical lining with on one side very positive visual narrative, and on the other side very negative verbal narrative, which is overwhelming in our news media coverage, and that is not only dominant in the Serbian media but also in different media that I looked. Through the analysis that I've read, through the academic articles over the years, it is like a common representation in visual manner of refugees and migrants all over Europe, because they are more represented in a negative way, like people who are going to do something to us, to harm our communities, and they have those visual narratives have actually boosted more negative attitudes towards people than something you could have read from the articles. Also, what is missing from the coverage is the analysis, actually, the analytical approach, which can actually make us more aware of the problems than putting like this man stole from the church in a small church in Serbia, or the migrants broke and stole from the houses, or they attacked this and that woman. So it's kind of a very complicated thing that is rooted in the reception of migration as such. And I would urge IOM, and I would really like other international organizations who specifically deal with this issue on migration to have kind of more campaigning and more workshops designed for visual communication on migration. We know from our past collaboration that it was really great, that we have had very great experts talking with our students, and really my students gained a lot from this. But this is just a small number of my students who actually graduated in the meantime. They became journalists in the newspapers, and now if you ask them, they would know how to make a proper story. And I would also like to mention our University of Galway GMMA workshop, where we also brought our students to Ireland, and where we had a great workshop on visual representation and generally representation of migration, which contributed to at least a small change of narrative in the newspapers. But what is striking is that you still are talking, that IOM is still talking about the need to change the narrative, which means it's a very complicated thing. It cannot be changed not only overnight, but over years, as I see.
Definitely, no, and that's a struggle we keep having, even we talk today about media, but social media is also a big issue in terms of narrative around migration. To wrap up, you already answered a bit the question, but what do you think we can do together, media, academia, NGOs, civil society, and international organizations, to try to change this narrative? So we had this GMMA, the training together workshop for students, but do you think there are any other avenues where we can work together to actually do something and try to change this?
This is a great avenue, but don't forget to call migrants and refugees to join. Because not only academia, not only media, not only IOM and other organizations, civil society organizations, We need to collaborate with the real people and the people who have had already these experiences. I would like to extend my gratitude also to one of my great colleagues from the social work department, Anita Burgund. I participated in her 2 years ago in a great workshop that it was called co-creation of narratives, because the migrants from the country came and they worked together with our students on co-creating some of the media products together. We can partner in the future, in the very near future, to bring also future journalists there, my students, to bring the real people who have been experiencing different kinds of migration. It's not only migrating from war or from conflict area, or, I don't know, talk about the Gaza war and talking about all sorts of different things right now happening in the world, because as you see, the world is in real change, and different kinds of migration are to be seen. Not only the labor migration, which is the most common here and most visible, but also all different sorts of migration that can be actually explored more. And to bring through different workshops and to partner with also professional journalists, and I would also bring different kinds of editors and media professionals and photographers and civil society organizations. And of course, I would urge, for example, the experts who are in public opinion, experts for public opinion, to tell us how to approach to the public in a even better way. So we are all aware that a change of narrative is still needed, and we have something to work on, because we all already have a lot of analysis, and I think that only together and we can contribute to this change. Yes.
Thank you for these points. Really interesting, and I think important to remember.
Thank
I
you.
think we can wrap up the discussion.
Sure.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for ongoing cooperation. I hope it will continue for many years still.
I hope so too, yes.
And I hope we'll be back in Belgrade soon to work together.
Thank you, François. Thank you, IOM Cafe, for inviting me to this podcast.
Thank you.